Yeah, we are human, but we've created something together that's very much virtual. So although we're definitely human beings, we have created something that isn't. Firstly, just a word about us and why we're here. So I run a business called Quintillion Cognitive Technologies, and Andrew runs a business called Edease. And we're two entirely separate businesses, but for the last 7 or 8 months, we have been collaborating on putting our two sets of technologies together. So we have actually become a bit of a double act over the last 7 or 8 months. And I wondered, actually, that's why Susie had us here, because we're sort of a bit ant and dec now. And therefore, it's very appropriate for the graveyard slot in mid-afternoon. And I'll leave you afterwards to figure out who's ant and who's dec. Suffice to say that he likes a drink and he's not a very good driver. So, first of all, I'm going to give you a few pointers first about what we do. And then Andrew will take over and he will talk about what Edease do and then how we put our two together. Because the starting point is what Quintillion does, and then it feeds through into what Edease does. So you do have to have a reasonable understanding of what we do first. And then in particular, the reason that we're here is we've partnered with Susie and Bright Futures to deliver as a pilot project what we're doing together exclusively into Guernsey alone. Because it's such a nice, discrete environment for us to test and develop this, and hopefully for Guernsey in particular to get a huge first mover advantage. So we'll see. So the first point really is what the hell does this mean? And that's a pretty bold statement of transforming well-being and performance. And well-being and performance really are those two big zeitgeist issues of our day, really. In well-being terms, if you want a really depressing read, if Brexit isn't depressing you enough already, then if you want a really depressing read, you should go onto the World Economic Forum website and download their Global Risks Report 2019, which is a 1-inch thick. Yeah, I mean, you need to take several tramadol before you start reading it because it's pretty scary stuff. But one of their top 6 risks globally they see as mental well-being for all sorts of reasons, and there are some incredible statistics in terms of mental well-being translating into mental illness, and this being one of the defining images of our day. And then the flip side of that is personal performance, and we heard this morning from the OECD, it's essentially the big economic issue of our day, and we hear this time and time again from British politicians, is productivity. And ultimately, yes, there are lots of systemic issues which drive productivity, but ultimately the key thing from our perspective that can drive productivity is personal performance and unleashing the individual, the real strengths within the individual. So these are the two issues that we're dealing with. And what we've essentially done is, at heart, we're a group of psychologists. And what we've done is we've combined psychology with technology for the first time, really, in order to transform well-being and performance. So we're about 2.5 years old, but the actual science behind it goes back 40-odd years. So I'll give you a bit of background as to where all that comes from. So what we essentially do is we do two things. We measure behavior, and then we help people manage behavior. Now, if you think about yourself as a human being, the only thing you really have a personal decision about is how you behave. And that sounds like an obvious thing, but how you behave is a totally personal choice for you. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter whatever issues you've had. The one thing you can make a personal decision about is how you behave. And so it's not about, as I say here, it's not about what happens to you, but it's how you react that matters. And the crux The crux issue that our chief scientist, a guy called Dr. Steve Goenkowski, he spent 40 odd years studying what successful people do differently. So he's essentially a research scientist who originally came out of Manchester University. And he has spent all this time studying the difference between the A team and the B team and what makes the A team, what successful people do differently, or what he calls the science of success. And the crux point of this is that what successful people do differently, and you're all looking at this slide and thinking about yourself now, I know this because I've done this a few times, is they play to their strengths, but the real crux is they manage their weaknesses. Because actually, what happens to most people is they might have a pretty good idea through practice of what their strengths are. But what they tend to do is they're what we call in psychology terms behavioral predispositions. The opposite of a strength is a weakness. And the key thing is when you're playing to your strengths that you also manage the other side of that behavioral predisposition, which can manifest itself as a weakness. And what successful people do differently is they manage their weaknesses very, very well. And that sounds like motherhood and apple pie, but I challenge you in this room to say whether anyone's actually heard it described in those sort of grossly oversimplified terms before. But that is the nub of where personal performance lies, is playing to your strengths, but managing your weaknesses. And if personal performance lies there, then well-being lies there. Because ultimately, well-being is about making very high-quality decisions, about putting yourself in an environment in which you can thrive, and about being able to build very high-quality relationships. And that third one is really the elixir of life. Most people define success in life really as defined by whether you're good at building high-quality relationships. And that can be a relationship with yourself, with your partner, with your boss, with your parents, with your siblings, whatever it is. So we are about helping people to understand the behaviors they have to manage and then helping them through some quite simple processes, all entirely virtual, as to how to manage those behaviors. So this guy, Steve Goenkowski, and the key point about this is that he devised, this is going back 20 odd years, he devised a very clever way through some quite complex psychometric analysis, is to analyze behavioral predispositions. And these are not, this is not personality. It's a sort of, in a very simplistic way, it is a measure of personality. But essentially, the real key difference is this is your behavioral hardwiring. This is who you really are. This is your type. This is who you revert to, no matter who you might like to think you are. And it's not how you behave, it's how you're preconditioned to behave. And that's a key point, because under pressure, most people revert to their behavioral predispositions, and those are the things you have to manage. And therefore, if you can measure those things, then you know the things you've got to manage. What Steve has done brilliantly over the last 25 years is he's then taken those behavioral predispositions and he's combined them with all sorts of practical, everyday scenarios which people come across, whether it's a career decision or whether it's how you interact with the classroom, or how you, if you're a kid, how you manage your homework, or how you interact with other people. And what he's done is he's combined your behavioral predispositions with those common problems that most people grapple with. If you know what the problem is and you know how your predisposition is going to interact with that, then you know where you're going to come across problems and where you're not. And it produces a sort of heat map, if you like, of where your particular issues are likely to lie. And then, of course, you can create a route map, a behavioral change route map around guessing around it. And it's brutally effective. And essentially, all this stuff is not rocket science. The stuff that Steve's done is combine it extremely well, and he's tested it to destruction over many, many years. But essentially, what we do has been done in professional sport and in business leadership coaching for 30, 40 years. There's nothing particularly new in what we're doing. What we've done is combined it in a different way, put it on a very clever AI platform, and essentially democratized it. for anyone and everyone. So all these things which were previously only available if you were prepared to spend 20,000 quid to be coached by a professional coach as a chief executive, and now it's available to anyone in an app. And we think that we're the first people to do this properly. So the key difference for us is there are plenty of people who are doing well-being related apps, most of them very generic. The key point with us is we measure the behavior, and if you measure the behavior, you can manage it. And you can only manage it if you can measure it. So that's the key distinction with us. There are two big uses for this, big use cases for this, and we're going to be talking with, Andrew's going to be talking later primarily about the B2B route. But the B2C route is all a pure end user tool. The B2C route. The B2B route is all about behavioral measurement in a corporate context and then performance management. So it's more on the big brother look down and get you performing better versus the B2C route, which is very much an end user tool. But the other use case for it ultimately is we should, assuming we can get millions of people on this, we're going to have potentially what could be the most valuable data set in the world. Because it's the ultimate small data. This is not big data. This is the smallest possible data. It's the actual psychological DNA of individuals, which doesn't change. Your behaviors can change, your values can change, even your motivations could potentially change, but your behavioral predispositions are baked into you by at least the age of 8, if not sooner. And there's a big debate about nature and nurture, but we won't go into that. But assuming, actually, there was one, Susie's son was in the room, so his behavioural predispositions are not pre-baked into him yet, possibly not, but everyone else in this room, you're done. The key thing is, you can't change who you are, but you can change how you behave, and that's a personal choice. So on the B2C side, and this is partly what we're talking with Susie about in terms of career direction for Guernsey's teenagers, is we've created, working off the platform is a fully interactive app, which is purely based around well-being. And we happen to have focused it, initially, we focused it on teenagers. So we spent 2.5 years researching and developing this in partnership with teenagers and schools to hit their hair on fire issues. And you can see here, those hair on fire issues, learning, obviously, how do I do best at school and exams, careers, confidence, stress, particularly learning stress, and relationships. And this is all entirely virtual. There's not a single piece of human interaction with this at all. And where it sits very much in that mental well-being space, which is actually, in a digital sense, is scarily unoccupied at the moment. Best parallel, I'm not sure how many of you would use Headspace or Calm, these guided meditation apps, which are extremely popular. And we're raising money at the moment, and that's a parallel which I love to give to private equity of, well, look at the business case for Headspace, that's us plus. But that's the space, and it's a big, yawning, open space. Here's a few examples of how the teenage piece works. It's extremely user-friendly. We've actually done there are 3 or 4 different variations of this design running at the moment, and we're just finding which one we're going to use, but this is the primary one we've been using. The other side of it, on the B2B side, and this is partly where we are with Andrew, is the opportunity to measure people, not for their own well-being purposes, but for the purposes of making decisions about them, or for the purposes of performance managing them. And one thing which we're developing with Andrew is to use our platform and the basic behavioural measurements that come off it in a recruitment context. This is something which Steve's technology has been used for years and years like this. It's just that it's perfectly possible to automate it. And this could be used as a selection tool from recruiting 10,000 cleaners to recruiting a CEO of a FTSE 100 company. And then on the other end, just a comfort factor for you, hopefully, is this is not a global data giant type opportunity. to effectively exploit people's personal data. Quite the contrary. This is a fully data protected private model, and in fact we've discovered through our work with teenagers that the only way that teenagers will interact with this is if they trust it implicitly. A coaching relationship is a relationship of trust and confidence, and therefore the data is 100% protected. However, the underlying data set, if it's anonymized and aggregated, has incredibly powerful usages in terms of public policy decisions, all sorts of research functions, and actually until this database is available, it's quite hard to imagine actually all of the potential uses for it. But if you were, I mean, for example, if you were the States of Guernsey and you were interested in, okay, what are 16-year-old girls in Guernsey thinking about? What are their behavioural predispositions? What does their normal distribution curve look like for their behavioural dispositions? And how are they using this app? And therefore, what are they worried about? Because this is all about solving problems. And we could tell you that with a flick of a switch. And then you could make policy decisions off the back of that. So it's quite novel, and it's quite different. And Andrew is now going to tell you about how we're putting it together with Edease.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you. My name is Andrew Clements. I'm the Chief Exec and founder of Edease. We teach the world about jobs. There we go. And we're proud to be the world's first job engagement platform. What's a job engagement platform? Well, the basis of why I founded Edease, my wife complains to me every day, why did you found this company? I worked at Ford Motor Company for about 5 or 6 years. I ran their apprenticeship program and worked with their graduate program. And I worked then the other side of the fence for the Business Innovation and Skills Department, and then had the pleasure of working for Mr. Boris Johnson for 2 years and running his London apprenticeship campaign. I'll tell you more about that perhaps over a drink. Less for now when I'm being recorded, shall we say. We had 45 to 50,000 applications for about 700 or 800 jobs. So how do you differentiate between those thousands, hundreds of applicants per job? Some we would have in particular areas, for example in Essex, where we'd have about 250 to 300 applications for one job. Now, slightly different in Guernsey, but I'm just giving you the context of why we founded the company. The problem was that with the limited amount of jobs, you had to look at your grades was the main point of siphoning people off. And when you came to actually meet the people that you'd shortlisted, their knowledge of the jobs was appalling. They didn't actually know a lot of the time what they were applying for. And that didn't matter whether it was at Ford or working in the FTSE 100 companies. Young people were just applying for jobs over and over and over. And, oh, I've got an interview. What was that job I applied for again? And actually, that's a slightly broken system, and it's the kind of the typical, as we say, in the FTSE 250, it's your standard, linear, boring PDF application, and you churn through them day in, day out. And most crucially, in terms of knowledge of jobs, it's actually where young people are like, what is an actuary? What do they actually do? What does a business analyst do? What's the difference between being an engineer at British Telecom and an engineer at Shell? And it's these kind of questions that actually there's no true single environment for those answers, those questions to be answered. I talk about the PDF, the tedious application processes. At Ford, we had a 4 or 5 page, fill out all your details, fill out your education, and then at the end of it, it would be, well, sorry, if you don't hear from us, then we're sorry. Well, it's 2019, and actually we need to break that system. The traditional recruitment processes need to be disrupted, and actually we owe it to the next generation of talent. We need to give them more feedback. So take the example where we used to have 2 applicants. We'd have applicant A and applicant B. We'll call them Joey and Sarah. Joey, great CV that his mum wrote, just to be clear. Good exam results, presents well, comes to his interview looking great because he's got selected because he's got the grades. Presents really well. I bet your bottom dollar you'll get the job. Sarah, mixed CV. Let's say she got a D in English literature. She goes in the bin, immediately goes in the bin. What we don't know about Sarah is that she can take an engine apart blindfolded. She works with her dad at a weekend, working on cars. That's her hobby, that's her enthusiasm. But we have just missed that opportunity. We've put her in the bin because she didn't have the right grades. That's an opportunity missed for the employer, and it's an opportunity missed for Sarah. And actually, Joey gets the job. 6 months later, he hates the job, or because he doesn't know what a spanner or a hammer is, he probably gets fired. Sarah, she goes on, perhaps she gets a job. She could just be left in limbo, as so many talented young people are. What do? We change that entire world by using beautiful interactive video to educate people about the specific jobs in your company. So we in Ford now, the example I would use is that you would teach people about what an engine does at Ford Motor Company, allow all of those applicants, regardless of their grades or background, all 45, 50,000 applicants now, get a chance to engage with Ford Motor Company, learn about that job, and crucially see if they're going to be any good at that job. So we open the window to your world. We effectively celebrate your story. You're the experts at what you do. You do the jobs that you do every day. So use yourselves. We use your experts. We celebrate you as individuals to inspire the next generation. So that may be women in STEM. Listening to Jessica earlier, a great representative of running a law firm, being a female, and listening to her and the difficulties and challenges that she had to go through. Well, if we can make a video of Jessica saying, well, actually, I'm a managing partner of a law firm, and the amount of young women that would inspire to, actually, I can go into a male-hungry, dominated legal industry and feel that I can actually make something of myself. And for the applicants, they get a fully validated skills report. So who am I? Am I actually going to be any good at this job? I've learned a bit about the job, and now I've applied it in a real-world case environment. I've got some good results, and I've got feedback. So if I haven't quite met the grade, I've only got 65, 70%, you can see then where you have perhaps fallen below the grade and where you can therefore improve. So the worst case scenario is that you've gone through an application process, you've been upskilled, you may not get that job at Ford, but when you go to then apply for a job at Nissan, you've had some skills that help you get that job at Nissan. So the whole job application process becomes a positive experience. Applying for jobs is usually a terrible, horrible thing. Well, we want to change that. We want to be the YouTube for jobs where people come and access education and go, oh, I'll apply for that job. I'll learn about the job. It should be a positive thing, something that people are excited about and find where they fit. In terms of the value, therefore, for the employers, it is a massive branding exercise. I spoke to a gentleman after a conference a couple of weeks ago, and he said, you sound like a very clever marketing company, because essentially we are celebrating your brand and your story and bringing your company to life in a completely transparent way. So the worst case, as I said, when the applicant doesn't quite get the job at Ford, well, actually, the engagement between that applicant and Ford, potentially a candidate to a customer, and using that terminology, that is still strong. And as a side note, we did a small test. Well, it wasn't small, it was months of hard work, but it was with Virgin Media Group. They had 150,000 applicants for their customer services division. What we found is that because their application process was so poor, and because they didn't get feedback, and because they didn't get those calls back, and they didn't get that email, then the customers that had Virgin were going, well, I don't want to be with Virgin anymore. I'll move to Sky. Virgin Media were losing £7.3 million a year because their recruitment processes were broken. And the same thing goes with Ford. We subsequently did a study with Ford. Parents going, well, my child just went through the recruitment process to be an apprentice or to be a graduate. They didn't hear back. I was going to buy a Ford Mondeo next week. I'm now going to buy a Nissan. And it's that brokenness of a recruitment process can be so damaging to a brand. Generation Z, I'm sure some people have, or many of you have heard of it, the youngsters that are born from the year 2000, they are a completely different beast to most of us sitting in the room today. They require more, they expect more, they do their research. There are far more things that are important to them, not the car, not the benefits, not the health insurance. It's about what are you doing for environmental impact? What are you doing to help with, to support with mental health and well-being? All of those things is what we build into those videos to sell your brand and make sure that people understand that you actually care about those things, not just what money you're going to get and what's your daily job going to look like. So in being completely open and transparent, we open the doors to everyone. No longer are there barriers set with how you can apply for a job. So your diversity of your talent pool is hugely increased. As Susie, I think, referred to earlier, it's about having the musician work in a business environment. Or actually in law firms, we don't want a lawyer, we want someone that has business acumen who can do the legal stuff. And so as soon as you get to look at the people that would never normally have been looked at in your traditional processes, your workforce becomes more diverse and it becomes more productive. And with that, you get social mobility. We believe that in the next 2-3 years, if we can create an environment, particularly in the Guernsey to start, and then as we progress into other jurisdictions, the movement of employees into jobs that they actually find are compelling, that they're happy, and that they're productive in, will massively increase, potentially over time, the GDP of the United Kingdom. To you guys, in terms of employers, we obviously have all the fancy analytics, the sexy bit, as some of my tech guys say, which looks at the granular elements of how a learner is performing in those case study environments. What's your reach? What's your engagement levels? And looking at particular job roles and how you have managed to either educate the masses. So you may have said, actually we've educated 14,000 people today in what a business analyst does. And that's not just in Guernsey, that's across the world. That can be the child in Argentina wanting to actually learn something and coming across your company that's got your videos on our platform. You've supported that learner, we give you that details and that data on your reach. Now, comes to the exciting part. So we're very pleased today to launch our collaboration, both Edease and Quintillion, but with Bright Futures, for our initiative in Guernsey. I think you can hopefully see some of the synergies between Quintillion and Edease, both in the Quintillion side of that kind of psychology, behavioural management. Who am I as a person? Where do I fit in the world in terms of my predispositions, how I act, how I think, how I react to things, in relation with then what skills have I got and how can I apply those to the real world environment. And we want to work with you in a room. Everyone's talked today about collaboration. We want to work with the companies, with the states, with people, with experts, with the audience we have here to actually make something of this. We're flexible, we're a startup, so we don't have all these set terms. We can do basically what you want us to do, but we need you to sit in a room and tell us about what you want and the difficulties you have, and let us try and solve those together. So what we're initially offering is that in the collaboration fund, we will offer the platform to you for 2 years. We will share all anonymised aggregated data across all of the members for Guernsey, so you can start to see how you are comparing to your competitors in an anonymised fashion, obviously. And typically, we will continue to develop our platform over those 2 years, and all of those functionality and all of those updates will come with your joining in this collaboration today. We'll also give 15 minutes of free interactive video. So we make some pretty beautiful stuff, and you can come into the room afterwards and see some of the stuff that we've done. But if 20, 30 employers pledge to kind of be part of our collaborative committee, then that's hours and hours of video education for Guernsey young people and professionals to access, to learn from, to benefit from. We will create effectively an entirely bespoke Guernsey environment, a digital career service for Guernsey. Learners will be able to search local jobs, local employers, local people, and see where they fit in the island. They'll be able to look at what their skills are in relation to the Edease analytics, but combine that with the Quintillion analytics. So where am I fit, for example, a role in marketing? I think I want to do that. I actually do have the behavioural predisposition to be a good marketeer, but I don't yet quite have the skills. We will be able to help those youngsters, and vice versa as well. Behaviours, as Johnson alluded to, can change, and therefore you can change your behaviour. You've got all the skills for the job. We need to work on some of your behaviours to maximise your potential. They will have a beautiful dashboard, a profile, a careers page, all these things we've developed over the last few weeks in order to present this to you today. The platform will effectively be fully autonomous for employers to use. So you'll be able to pick your own career themes. We will obviously have set data lines in terms of the best career themes that we use for particular jobs. You can then launch your job roles autonomously on the platform. And then the analytics we're able to pull off that is the really exciting bit. So from this kind of environment, a top-down, how do you sit in Guernsey in an industry? What's your reach? What's your equality and diversity reach? How you compare with with other people in your sector? And then start looking into the minutiae of the roles. And then specifically the applicants that are right for those roles in your company. But all of this is still anonymised. We're taking the bias out of all of the recruitment process. It is only the point where you shortlist that applicant, you get all of the applicant's information and data on why have I shortlisted that individual. That's the point where you get to meet that individual. You are effectively inviting them to interview based upon the data that you've seen from their skills and from their behavioural profile. And at that point, we have hopefully an entirely new and innovative career service that's never been done in the world before. So we are exclusively piloting this in Guernsey. We want to roll this out in the next 6 months. We have the capabilities to do that. And so today, Susie, Jonathan and I invite you to kind of stick up your hand and say, actually, do you know what, this is a good idea. This has something behind it. Then come and speak to us, join us in this, and hopefully make a Guernsey the innovative island of skills. Thank you.